Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling something huge. We're literally deconstructing the dawn of one of the most influential cultures in human history, the Rig Vedic Aryans. And listen, our goal today, we are going to explain everything in detail. We're not going to miss a single line, a single point, or a single memory trick. We're building this society from the ground up, entirely based on the evidence they left behind. So grab a coffee, get focused, because by the end of this, you're going to have this whole civilization mapped out perfectly in your head.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We've got 6 key pillars: origins and early migration, conquests and major battles, Rig Vedic political structure, economy and material life, society, women and Varna, and lastly, religion and the gods.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Origins and Early Migration.
So the story kicks off around 1500 BC. This is when the earliest wave of Aryans, the folks who actually composed the Rig Veda, arrived in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent. They called this area the Sapta Sindhu, or the land of the 7 rivers. But the million-dollar question is, where did they come from? Well, the mainstream academic view points to the out-of-Central Asia theory. This suggests a migration from around the Caspian Sea or the Pontic steppe. And the biggest piece of evidence? It's language. It's wild. Sanskrit words like pitar and matar share the exact same root as the Latin pater and mater, and even the English father and mother. It heavily points to a shared Proto-Indo-European language. Plus, we actually see Aryans mentioned in ancient Mitanni records over in modern-day Syria around the exact same time. Now, to be totally impartial, there are other theories you should absolutely be aware of. There's the out-of-India theory arguing they originated in India and moved outwards, and the older Arctic theory based on some very specific astronomical references in the texts. But right now, linguistic and archaeological consensus heavily leans toward the Central Asian migration.
Okay, time for a quick prelims check to make sure we're locking this in. The first and most important Vedic text, the Rig Veda, is associated with which geographical region? Is it the Gangetic Plains, the Deccan Plateau, Sapta Sindhu, or the Brahmaputra Valley? It's Sapta Sindhu, the 7-river region in the northwest. You absolutely gotta remember that starting location.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds: conquests and major battles.
You see, when these early Aryans arrived in the Sapta Sindhu, they weren't walking into empty space. They actually bumped into indigenous folks they called the Dasyus, or Dasyus. The Rig Veda gets incredibly specific about these Dasyus. It describes them as Krishna Varna, meaning dark-skinned, Anasaa, meaning pug-nosed, and Shishna Deva, which refers to phallus worshippers. And here's the kicker: they didn't keep cattle for dairy. This suggests a totally different, maybe urban or trader-based economy. Because of this, a lot of historians draw a direct line between them and the urban Harappan civilization. Oh, and here's a massive detail you cannot miss. The Aryan chief god Indra is literally called Purandara in the Rig Veda. That translates straight up to breaker of forts. This heavily implies Indra was invoked to smash the fortified cities of these indigenous, possibly Harappan people.
But wait, it wasn't just Aryans versus Dasyus. They actually fought among themselves, too. The most famous showdown is the Dasarajna, or the Battle of 10 Kings. I've got a great memory trick for you here. Dasarajna literally means 10 kings fought on the Ravi River. Back then, it was called the River Parushni. Basically, King Sudas of the Bharata clan, guided by his chief priest Vasishta, went head-to-head against a massive mega-alliance of 10 kings. We're talking 5 non-Aryan tribes and 5 specific Aryan tribes: the Puru, Yadu, Turvashu, Anu, and Druhu. The outcome? Sudas and the Bharatas absolutely crushed it. This is a monumental win because it consolidated Aryan power. And get this, that victorious Bharata tribe is eventually what gave India its name, Bharatavarsha.
Let's test that retention real quick. The king who led the Bharata tribe to victory in the Battle of 10 Kings was who? Think back to our memory trick. Yep, it's Sudas. That massive victory allowed him to ally with the Purus later on, creating the Kuru tribe, which basically sets the stage for so much of later Indian history.
Moving right along to Section 3, Rig Vedic political structure.
All right, so they've conquered the land, but how did they actually run things? We're looking at a society that's just starting to transition from nomadic warbands into settled communities, so the early politics were super decentralized. At the top, you have the Raja. He's basically an elected war chief protecting the tribe, known as the Gopajanas. But honestly, the real power lived in the assemblies. You've got the Sabha, which was this exclusive VIP council of elders, and the Samiti, a much broader general assembly for everyday folks. Then there's the Vedatha. Remember this trick. Vedadatha is where they discussed vidya, meaning knowledge, poetry, and war. It is literally the absolute oldest assembly mentioned in the text. As for the officials, you've got the Sanani running the military and the Gramani leading a fighting unit that later evolved into a village headman role. But check this out. The most powerful official wasn't the king or the general. It was the Purohita, the chief priest. Let's make sure we lock in that specific detail, which was the oldest assembly mentioned in the Rig Veda, which later disappeared in the Vedic period. Use that memory trick. It's the Viditha. Seriously, it's crucial to remember that the Viditha faded away entirely by the later Vedic period, leaving only the Sabha and Samati to advise the king.
Next up, Section 4, Economy and Material Life.
We've talked battles and politics, but what about their day-to-day survival? Well, the absolute most important takeaway here is that they were nomadic herders first and farmers second. And nothing explains their worldview better than the word Gavishti. Now, what's really interesting here is that Gavishti literally translates to the search for cows. But in the Rig Veda, it's their word for war. That is how insanely central cattle were to their entire existence. In the early Rig Vedic age, you didn't fight over territory or land, you fought over cows. If you had more cattle, you were literally a richer, more powerful person. It was the ultimate status symbol.
Because their whole world revolved around livestock, they naturally operated on a barter economy. There was 0 coins, no minted money at all. Instead, they used a nishka. A nishka was actually a gold ornament that doubled as a standardized unit of value for trade. And guys, here is a massive, must-know fact. There was absolutely no iron in the Rig Vedic period. None. They only used ayas, which was their term for copper or bronze. Iron doesn't even show up until the later Vedic age, so definitely don't let that trip you up.
Let's pivot to Section 5, Society, Women, and Varman.
If you go in assuming all ancient history was rigidly patriarchal, the early Rig Vedic period is going to completely surprise you. Women actually held a remarkably high status during this time. They actively attended the Sabha and Samiti, those powerful political assemblies we just talked about. Plus, there was no child marriage. They could actually choose their own husbands through a practice called Swayamvara, and widow remarriage, known as Niyoga, was totally accepted. But honestly, the most impressive part? Women were out there actively composing the sacred Vedic hymns. I've got a producer's secret memory trick for you here. AVG, Apala, Vishvavara, Gosa. 3 women with average initials, but absolutely above average talent as hymn composers. That's a great way to remember them.
Now what about the Varna system? Well, early on, society was divided purely by your occupation, not by some rigid birthright. The formal Varna system actually shows up very late in the game. It's found specifically in the Purusha Sukta, which is in Mandala 10, the 10th book of the Rig Veda. Most scholars completely agree this was a later addition to the text. It paints this picture of a cosmic man, Purusha, being sacrificed to create society, the Brahmana coming from the mouth, the Kshatriya from the arms, the Vaishya from the thighs, and the Shudra from the feet. This right here is the very first textual mention of the 4 distinct Varnas.
Let's make sure that point stuck. The first mention of the 4 Varnas in Vedic literature is found in, what? Yep, the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda. You have got to connect Mandala 10 and the Purusha Sukta to the exact origin point of the formal Varna system.
And finally, we arrive at our last pillar, Section 6, Religion and the Gods.
So early Vedic religion was completely devoid of idol worship or fancy temples. None of that. Instead, it was entirely based on reciting powerful hymns and doing fire sacrifices to these epic personified forces of nature. Let's rapid fire through their pantheon using a few more mnemonics. Starting at the top, Indra is India's #1 god here. He has 250 hymns dedicated just to him. He's the thunder god, the Purandara, or fort breaker. Next up is Varuna. Just remember he watches the universe and upholds the cosmic moral order, a concept called Rita. Then you've got Agni with 200 hymns. He's the fire god, basically acting like a giant matchstick messenger, carrying the people's offerings straight up to heaven. You also have Soma, which was both a highly revered sacred plant and an intoxicant, and Usha, the vibrant goddess of the dawn. Oh, and this is crucial, Savitri. Savitri is a solar deity, and she is exactly who the famous Gayatri mantra is addressed to. Rounding it out, we have Rudra, the fierce storm god who actually evolves into Shiva later on, Dasyus and Prithvi as the sky and earth pair, and the Maruts, who were Indra's storm companions.
Quick check on that conceptual understanding. In Rig Vedic religion, Rita refers to what? Remember, we just said Varuna watches the universe to uphold it. That's right, it's the cosmic moral order. It's the fundamental natural law that keeps the sun rising and society functioning.
So, the crucial point is, we did it. We just mapped the entire Rig Vedic civilization. Let's rapid-fire summarize the absolute highest probability facts just to prove we left no detail behind. They arrived from Central Asia around 1500 BC. The massive battle of 10 kings, Dasarajna, was fought on the Ravi River. The Vedanta was their oldest assembly, but the Purohita was the top dog official. They literally fought wars for cows, calling it Gavishti, and they valued a gold unit called a nishka. Iron didn't exist yet. Women had high status, remember AVG, Apala, Vishwavara, Gasa. The Purusha Sukta gave us the first mention of the Varnas. Indra was the top god with 250 hymns, and the Gayatri mantra was dedicated to Savitri.
We've deconstructed their origins, their epic wars, their politics, and their gods. But I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. If the early Rig Vedic people were just nomadic herders who left behind absolutely no physical palaces, no grand monuments, and no minted coins, how in the world did a collection of recited, memorized poetry manage to build the unshakable social and spiritual foundation of the entire Indian subcontinent for millennia to come? It really makes you think about the sheer undeniable power of language and belief. Thank you so much for joining me in Mastering this Explainer. Keep this structure locked in your mind, and you'll be perfectly prepared to see how everything flips upside down when we explore the later Vedic period. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.